Welcome to the Cool and Interesting People podcast. I'm Arthur Bird, a speaker, college instructor, movie reviewer, and writer. Cool and Interesting People is a conversation with someone I know, giving their thoughts and life stories, which I find interesting and inspiring. They just happen to be cool. My definition of cool is someone whose presence makes me feel very relaxed, at ease, and wanting to find out more about them. The main reason I wanted to do a podcast like this is usually talking to someone cool at a party or social gathering. We're having a great conversation, and then someone comes up and interrupts us. The moment is gone. I would think there's so much more I wanted to ask them. Cool and Interesting People is a way to have that uninterrupted conversation with that person I always wanted to have.
On podcast 77, I had the honor to talk with someone you may think of as What Happened To? We answer that question with former WFMJ TV reporter Jessie Graves, who left the station in 1995. He talks about his years at TV 21, and you may be surprised how he got his news reporting job at the station. Jessie reminisces about some of the people he worked with and when he decided to leave WFMJ. Jessie shares where he was born and his childhood growing up on Youngstown's east side. Jessie tells the story on how he knew about Black Monday, the day of the announcement of the closing of the steel mills in the Youngstown-Camel area, the Sunday before, from an unlikely source, a really good story. Jessie talks candidly about his current health situation and almost dying 3 times. But back on a humorous note, we find out about the origin of the famous black Russian hat that Jessie used to wear out on news stories. Also, he gives great insight into young journalists and their effect on the news business. Finally, Jessie gives his life mantra, which is simple and to the point. Let me reintroduce you to Jessie Graves. I want to welcome one of my favorite persons in the world to the Cool and Interesting People podcast. Many of you have seen him years ago on WFMJ. So we're talking with him. He's, of course, retired. And how would you kind of describe? It's Jessie Graves. How would you kind of describe what your status is now? That people would. Some people will say, "Hey, what happened to so and so?" So,
well, at this point, I can legitimately say I'm definitely retired.
Okay.
I am definitely that. There's no doubt about it. It's life in the slow lane now, and I have been blessed with the opportunity to be able to say that the better part of my life has been toward this type of a goal, to be this relaxed, to be in a situation where I'm comfortable and I'm around friendly people and really not having too much to worry about other than what's for dinner, what's for lunch, and of course breakfast.
All right. How should we describe it? What city are we in?
We're in Sagamore Hills, which actually indirectly probably would be like more of a suburb of Akron.
Oh, okay.
But it's about 20 miles from Akron and it's 20 miles from Cleveland.
All right.
And it's in Summit County.
Okay.
And it's located near the MGM casino.
Okay. So we're in your estate, I like to call it, your studio apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a facility.
Yes, this is an assisted living facility. And I was blessed to be one of the first black males to live in this facility. I'm also the only black living in the facility. And I'm surrounded by senior citizens who are much older than I, and in turn, I'm considered to be a young buck, and still with a little drive and still with a little energy left. I'm more of a motivator than anything else at this point.
Okay. Well, the thing about it is, it's kind of for you getting this way because some things have happened to you. Health-wise.
Yes.
Do you want to kind of tell people, because it's an interesting story.
Health-wise, about 17 years ago, I was living in the city of Cleveland. And one morning I got up and I didn't feel quite right. So I called my sister and she stopped by, picked me up, and went to the Cleveland Clinic. The last thing I remember is going up on the elevator. I woke up 22 days later in the intensive care unit after having been on life support for 22 days and being notified that the family had planned my funeral and that they were all present waiting for them to turn the machine on. At that point, I denied them the funeral, thank God, and it went into rehab and then to come back out and resume my life. Exactly 17 years, almost to the date practically, I got sick. And at this point, I had moved to Warren, Ohio. And again, I had this weird feeling. And I ended up going into the hospital. And 15 days later, I woke up. I was in intensive care after having been on life support for 15 days. My family had planned my funeral. And then in 2020, I ended up catching the RSV virus. And at that point, I went back into the hospital.
What is that?
The RSV virus is something that traditionally little kids get, but it's an inflammation of the upper respiratory system. And because I'd had the half the lobe of my lung removed, it just weakened the lung capacity. So in the interim, it ended up I clotted. But I was only under for a day and a half. And despite this, on those 3 separate occasions, some people talk about when they're in this particular state of being unconscious and oxygen is being forced into your body. They experience the bright light. They see family and friends who have passed on. On all 3 of these separate occasions, I didn't see any of that. I went to a cement block room, neither having windows, doors, no entrance or exit. And I'm sitting on a cement block bench, and I'm looking at this wall. And I know that on the other side of this wall, it's being decided whether I live or whether I die. And on all 3 of those occasions, I have been sent back. So in turn, there is a feeling for me that I still have some work that has to be done. And in so doing, wherever I am, I can remain very positive, I can remain very upbeat, because I've dealt with the ultimate of all ultimates, and that is death. And as there's a little quote from the scripture that says, "Death, where is thy sting?" And I have been stung 3 times and have come back because there's some things that I've yet to do. So it's like an unfinished life. And at this point, until I complete whatever it is that I'm to do, I probably will not pass on. But in the interim, though, I've developed this philosophy of you're only as sick as your secrets. And I found that after having dealt with death, that I, at this point, had to clear the deck. I had to level the playing field. Because you see, it's your secrets that keep you. It binds you. It locks you down. It positions you and allows you to feel the guilt, the shame, all of the things that are at a total emotional level that's degrading to you as a human being. Because, see, you can be your own best friend and you can also be your own worst enemy. So today I choose to be my own best friend. And I will look out for me before I will look out for anyone else. Because I now know that I can be my best friend. And I know what it is to be comfortable in being my best friend. So, being that as a philosophy, I find that I've always had the ability to meet people where they were. And for some reason, I've always had people come up to me and tell me things, extremely personal things. And I used to wonder, why in the world are they telling me this stuff? This is stuff, that basically you probably should be telling your priest or somebody like that. Why are they telling me this? And I was once told that there's an expression that I have on my face that makes it appear that I am so involved in whatever it is that they're talking to me about that it seems like I'm understanding. But in most cases, my mind's 1,000 miles away, but it's just the expression. So today I believe in the power of the spoken word. And so in dealing with the power of the spoken word for me personally, I had to eliminate looking at life through the rearview mirror. Because if you remember, when you are by yourself and you start thinking, it's usually not good thoughts. You find that at certain times you will have some of the guilt and shame of events that you've had happen in your life replay, and it goes through the back of your mind just like a ticker tape. And as that tape plays through the back of your mind, you find yourself feeling the same shame or the same anger as if you could reach back and totally change it, but you can't. And so if you look at life through that rearview mirror, you'll always find that that mirror has a casing around it. And so therefore it's totally isolated. And all those events are playing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over and over again. And as you continue to look back, you get further and further back. And you feel more and more shame. You feel more and more guilt. You don't feel anything good about yourself. And the only thing you have to do is to refocus, look down, and then look up, and look through that windshield. And when you look through the windshield, even though the mirror is there, you look at all of the possibilities that exist beyond that windshield.
I got you. I got you. Let's take you back. I think a lot of people are always kind of curious. Let's go back to little Jessie.
Okay.
Where were you born?
Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay.
I'm a ridge runner. I'm a hillbilly. I'm the oldest of 9. I basically was babysitter, chief cook, and bottle washer for 6 of my brothers and sisters. Diaper changes, the whole 9 yards. As the older, that was the job, and believe me, it fell on you.
How did you get to Youngstown?
Well, my parents originally, my father worked in a coal mine, and we lived in a little town called Pettis, West Virginia, which would be, it's about 40 miles from Charleston, which is the state capital. And the coal mines went out, and my aunt lived in Youngstown. So my dad and my mother, they came to Youngstown, and he got a job working in a steel mill, and they stayed with my aunt. And then once they got everything straightened around, then they bought a house. And when they bought the house, they sent back for me and my 2 other brothers. And at that point, we joined a sister who was already born, and she was born in West Virginia, but my parents took her because she was the baby, and they had brought her to Youngstown. So it was 4 of us that actually were reunited in Youngstown, and then the rest came after.
What high school did you graduate from?
East High School.
Okay, all right.
Born and raised, actually for all intents and purposes.
What street did you live on, actually?
Wilson Avenue.
Oh, okay. Which part of Wilson? Were you near Camel, or were you...
No,
right
down. On Wilson Avenue across from St. Stephen's Church.
Gotcha.
And Mount Zion Baptist Church on your... we were on the same side of the street as Mount Zion Baptist Church.
Okay.
And which is still there today.
Was the family religious, or?
Oh, extremely.
Okay.
Extremely religious.
So your background, religious. What were some of your hobbies? I mean, you were kind of like taking care of the... Did you have hobbies, or were you taking care of the family?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the neatest thing of all is... everyone had their space. At one point, there was 14 people living in one house, a 4-bedroom house. But each person had their own space. And I always had an interest in geography. I had an interest in reading. I loved doing art. In fact, that was my desire, was to become an elementary art teacher. And so in turn, I've always had that interest in that.
Okay, so you were the art teaching?
Yeah.
Some of the hobbies that you had.
I enjoy reading. I love everything but math. Math was never my strong suit, and to this day it's still extremely difficult. But everything else I was pretty good at. And being the oldest, it created some interesting things because you're the first one to graduate. And then I have a brother who was less than 2 years younger than me, who immediately graduated the next year behind me. And then I had a third brother. And so it ended up, my brother that was next to me, he later became a minister. And the brother who was behind me, he eventually went to the Naval Academy, spoke Mandarin Chinese, and then became an ensign, then left the Navy, then went back to law school and got a law degree, and then argued a case in front of the Supreme Court as a single attorney. So we've had some little history. And then when my brother, my baby brother, who is 15 years younger than I, went into first grade, my mother went back to college. And 2 years later, she got her degree on her 25th wedding anniversary. And she taught German and English at Wilson High School. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Now, did you, after that, after your graduation, were you able, you didn't go into the military?
No.
And did you go to college?
I went about 2 years.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's go with when you got your job at FMJ. Tell us the story of that.
Now that, I'll tell you what, for all intents and purposes, my life has been extremely charmed. It has truly been charmed, and it has truly been blessed. Because most of my family members now will tell you that for some reason they have a sense that somebody very, very old prayed for me when I was a child. After I graduated high school, I went to Pittsburgh. And that's where I went to school for about 2 years. Ended up, I came back to Youngstown. I took a job at Strauss's department store in the sporting goods section. And at that point, the sporting goods section was located on the mezzanine. I have never once played golf. I knew nothing about pool. I knew nothing about baseball, although I played it. But, you know, as far as the technical terms and what's necessary for equipment and things like that. So I went to the library and I did quite a bit of research. So I worked in the sporting goods department, and for a year I worked in the sporting goods department. I became the #1 salesman, and I received an award for being the salesman of the year for selling the largest amount of merchandise out of one single individual sporting goods department. One day this guy comes in. He buys approximately about $500 worth of baseball equipment. And so I'm busy running the bull with him, you know, about this glove is for the catcher, and if you notice the netting, and this, that, and the other, and it's leather here. And he says, oh, you seem pretty knowledgeable about your merchandise. And I said, yeah. He says, I'm going to have a job for you. So he says, here's my card. Come, this is on the money. He said, come down about 1 o'clock on Friday to this address, which was 101 West Boardman Street. I go down to the station, walk in, they put me in a room, and they give me a newspaper, the Vindicator, of course. And they said, read. And so I started reading, and that began my career.
Now, did you start in radio, or did you start?
I initially started in radio. Yes.
What was the shift? What was your shift?
4:30 to 12:30.
Oh, okay.
4:30 in the morning to 12:30.
So what did that contain? What did you do?
At 4:30 in the morning, you start off by making phone calls. And there were 26 telephone calls you had to make every morning. And that was to the various fire departments, police stations, and hospitals, finding out the events that happened overnight. And that in turn allowed me to create a network of sources that proved throughout my entire career to be extremely reliant and very, 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 very beneficial.
We'll talk about that in just a little bit. When did you, so what year was that?
1971.
1971. And when did you make the jump to television?
1976.
Okay. So for 5 years, you were just kind of honing your network. Because it's very interesting because when I worked with you, and I would always see you working the phones, and then I would look at the news later on, or see it, I'm going, whoa, they don't have nearly as much, or the sources, they had a source from a source from a source. When you actually had the source, you and Dick Skelton were very good at that. The source.
Right.
And everything. That due to your connections?
Correct. But also there was one of the founders of WFMJ, as far as radio was concerned. His name was Bill Crooks. And at the time that he was still in the radio side of WFMJ, he was in charge of doing the filing system, along with reporting the news and such. But the scripts from each newscast had to be filed away based on the day, and it was kept in a filing system in a cabinet. And so I would help him with the filing system. And so therefore, as things progressed on, I could go back and immediately click onto, like you would do at a computer now, quickly do a search. And I could get the approximate day and the approximate year, and also possibly the reporter that may have done the story initially. So that also provided me with additional background information.
One of the things, did you like reporting, or was it just kind of that you kind of got thrown into it? Was it a point where you say, hey, I like this, or I'm just doing what I'm doing?
No, I liked it. I loved it. Because it was natural. It was no effort. It was no effort whatsoever. Because you work the job does not work you. And so in my particular case, by having known everybody, and the beautiful thing is that as time progressed on, in the 23 years that I was working, these particular individuals who started off as say, as a sheriff's deputy became sheriff, or an individual who became, had once worked as a fireman became fire chief, or the person that was the dispatcher became such and such. And then as they expanded and their careers broadened, so was my availability to be able to reach them.
Okay.
You know, so in turn, it was just a consistency of being with basically the same people as they progressed through their lives and their careers, and then still to be able to reach back and touch them.
Okay. One thing that's kind of curious, if you're looking, I'm going to throw out some names, and I'm going to throw out the number one name because this guy was a really, really, really nice when I was an intern, Ed Barron.
Extremely nice guy. Extremely nice. It also was from the old school. He knew you when you were growing up. And as he grew, so did they. So he had quite a few sources.
Okay.
And so that's what it's about, is developing sources. and knowing that if you tell a story, you're going to tell it factually, and to the point where you're not out to play getcha. That's the one thing I find with today's journalism, especially today's journalists in particular. They're out. Everyone's out to make a name for themselves at the expense of somebody else, and they don't care who they trample over to get it. Because guess what? They're only planning on being here as long as it takes to get the next job. And so therefore, as they struggle to get the next job, they will cut their own mother's throat in order to do so. But in the end, they cut themselves.
That is well said. And because I want to talk about that, because it's almost like it was almost like family, that you treated a source so that you can go back to them.
Correct.
You didn't do anything, to do that. And it just seemed like exactly just like what you said. So I'm going to probably forget some people, but I want to go with Dick Skelton.
Dick and I. He loved to read, and so did I. I would read a book recommended for him. He would read a book recommended for me. And we would exchange books, because we each kept a drawer in our desk that had a book in it. And when it was downtime in the newsroom, we'd pick up a book. And we'd sit there and both be reading, or, whatever's going on. And the interesting thing for me, I developed a sixth sense in the fact that I could be sitting just about anywhere in that newsroom and would hear on the police monitor any activity that would be going on that might be of newsworthiness. And immediately pick up the phone, make a call to whatever that destination is, and get the information that's needed to determine whether we would go out on it or not.
I noticed that with you more than other people. It almost like you would just stop. It was almost like your head, just kind of like the gazelle. Just, all right, there's a line in the story. Let me come out with a couple other people. Jim Klepper.
Jim. He's a character in the sense that he was a serious reporter. But we all have our proclivities, and his was from time to time he would do the weather, and it's a very pleasant 69, and he was meaning it both figuratively and literally. And we would always laugh whenever he would say 69. And both figuratively and literally. But that was the type of humor that he had. And that was always evident in the newsroom. That he would have that type of levity. And he would say it with a very straight face, with his deep voice, it's a pleasant 69. And then just that little pause, and then move on from there.
Well, I remember his wife. I think it was Fran.
Yes, Fran.
Oh my God, how gorgeous was she?
Yes.
She was really very nice.
Oh yeah, and it was such a tragedy. Because I'll tell you what, he never totally recovered from that.
I don't think he did. How could he? How could he? He adored her, and she was
and plus
beautiful.
He married late in life too.
Yeah, she was beautiful. Again, and let me. Well, I'm not sure if you saw him a lot. I'm sure you knew of him, but is Larry Yeagley.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. Now, that's back to the radio days.
Right.
Okay, now, at that particular point, he was working both radio and TV. And he was working as the weatherman on the 6 and 11 o'clock news. And Yeagley, I'll tell you what, for me, he reminded me of a cowboy. Because some of his expressions, you would think he might have been from Texas. Because he was sort of like the cowboy. And oh my goodness, when he got to laughing, it was unreal. It was unreal.
And then I kind of want to end it out. There's other people I don't want to get into, but Pam Miles.
Oh, Pam. Oh, shucks. Man, the times we had together was absolutely unreal. Pam, when she first got hired, she tried to play the little innocent baby doll, and then she really revealed her true colors. She was a die-in-the-wool news person. I mean, she, tooth and nail, she would get something. One way or the other, she would get it. Whatever it was she was after, she would get it. And Pam was, oh man, what a character. And especially when she was anchoring on the weekends, we never knew what type of outfit she was going to wear next. Because I'll tell you, a couple of times you would swear you were looking at the Jetsons. Because, I mean, she would come up with some outfits that would be absolutely out of this world.
Well, the thing about it is, now that you can you remember some of the stories that you really were impactful or memorable for you?
Well, the one that really, really, really hit very close to home was Black Monday.
Mm.
Black Monday, I knew totally about on Sunday. I had a friend that worked as a maitre d' in Pittsburgh at the Hilton Hotel. And all of the presidents of the steel companies flew into the Pittsburgh airport in their private jets. And they hid them out in several of the hangars at the airport. And they all met on the top floor in the penthouse presidential suite of the Hilton in downtown Pittsburgh. And that's where they conducted their meeting. Somehow, some way, someone went in to change some water in one of the conference rooms and just casually overheard closing. I then received a phone call. I then called Ed Barron, the news director. I then contacted Mayor Jack Hunter, set him up for an interview. I set up the Mayor of Campbell, and then I set up the Mayor of Struthers for interviews about the impact of the shutdown of the steel industry in the Mahoning Valley.
Wow.
The day before.
Yeah.
And then came the news conference, and that's all I had to do is pick up the phone.
Well, when you look at your career, of what you did. Oh, one other thing before you get in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be remiss if I don't ask you about the Russian hat.
Where
did the Russian hat come from?
Well, I'll tell you what. I saw it in New York City. Because, what happened, the majority of the time, when I was working with radio news, I was off on Saturdays and Sundays. Okay? I would get off of work at 12:30. There was a flight out of Youngstown Municipal Airport at 1:45 for Newark, New Jersey. I would take an empty suitcase, get on that flight, fly to Newark, New Jersey, stay in New York City over the weekend, and then come back on Sunday evening. And when I did that, I would go to the garment district, and I would buy my clothes. And I would buy factory defects. So this one trip I was up there, and they had this hat. And I said, I'm going to get that something. And that's where I got the Russian hat. And of course, it was an award winner because that same year we had the blooper tape, and Kanye and I won the award. Remember?
Yeah, I do remember that. You did make the blooper tape quite a bit.
Yes.
We won't get in. You know what? Those would be the funniest things if the lost long found of the blooper.
Could be found.
I think we've tried to find them. We couldn't. I couldn't find
More
them.
likely Hank Perkins.
Yeah, probably in his vault somewhere. The thing, when you look back on your career, anything proud of, or, you know what I mean, you know, you're sitting here, you've got your life, you know, 3 times back, you know, it's, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say, because I don't think you really believe in regrets, but I'm just saying, you know, you had a good run.
Still running.
Yes.
You understand? Only in a different direction, but still in the same direction.
Well, let me ask you this question. When did you know it was time for you to leave?
It wasn't necessarily time for me to leave. It just arrived at a point where you just got tired and got careless, and which was my fault. I got careless. And in so doing, there had already been previous traps set. Because one way or the other, the rail was already greased.
Okay.
One way or the other, it would have happened. Sometimes it comes sooner, sometimes it comes later, but it would have happened.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's a promo, I'm just remembering this because I did a little research on you. I wasn't sure if I was going to do this, but I said just to be on the safe side. Mm-hmm. So there's a promo with you with the hat on.
Oh, okay. Oh, is there?
There's a promo.
Oh, wow.
There's a promo. I'll show it to you. I think I still have it.
Good thing. Can I get a dub of it?
I can send you something.
Oh, great, great.
I want, because I don't want to take up too much of your time in the sense of, I just want to. I'm trying to phrase this in the kind of right way to do honor to you. But I think a lot of people have already heard it. Mm-hmm. But I always like to end the podcast with someone's mantra. It doesn't have to be a life mantra, but what's your mantra at this point? Let's put it this way.
Life's a journey. Enjoy the ride.
Okay. All right. Anything that for the future, just kind of like one day at a time, or how's that work for you?
We only have today.
All right. With that, I am going to leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you very much, Jessie Graves.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Art Bird.
I would like to thank Jessie for taking the time to talk with me and being very candid about his life. And hearing his one-of-a-kind laugh was a joy to hear. If you'd like to reach out to Jessie, he is on Facebook. My thanks to PurplePlanet.com for the music Funk City, Hubbub, and Soda Pop. As you know, we are counting backwards from 200 to 1 regarding the podcast. Thank you for listening to Podcast 77 of Cool and Interesting People. I'm Arthur Bird, and remember to stay cool